Alright, this is the tutorial on how to use the Autograder and Github to process your submissions for C343. The first thing you guys will need to install is something called IU Secure. It's a software that allows you to connect to IU's VPN, and IU's VPN will allow you to connect to the Autograder. You cannot connect to the Autograder if you don't have Secure installed, so make sure you install that first. In order to install it, go on Google and search up IU Secure. There we go. It should be the very first link that comes up, so click on that first link. It should bring you to a window that looks like this. Right here. And of course, if you guys can't find it, you can just use this link up here. Now click on the second hyperlink here where it says install Secure, and make sure you install the correct installation for your OS. In my case, Windows, but for you guys, maybe Mac OS. Click on that link and it'll bring you to a separate tab here. Make sure you install the correct installer. For most machines, it'll be a 64-bit installer, so you can click on that, but you might want to check your machine to double check. Now this little page will come up saying log in for access. This is just logging in through your normal IU username and password, so do that real quick. Alright, once that is done, it should bring you to another page that gives you the download link right here. So click on this download link, save file, and once that is installed, open that up, hit OK, and when the installer pops up, hit next, and then press install. The instructions are pretty self-explanatory, so I already have it installed. I'm not going to install it again. You guys just need to follow through on this installation. Once you have it installed, then go back to that previous page and scroll down a bit where it says configure the connection and open up Secure. If you notice here, you'll see a list of connections here. In this case, there are no connections because we just installed the program. Hit the plus sign to add a connection right here next to connections, and then on type, make sure it says policy secure or connect secure. It shouldn't say firewall. For a name, you're just giving the connection a name. We'll just call it IU SSL VPN. And for server URL, make sure you type in https://vpn.iu.edu. Basically this server URL right here. Just follow these instructions. Alright, hit add, and it should pop up in your list of connections now. Next, just press connect, and a window will pop up asking for a username and password. The username and password is the same as your IU username and password, the same one that you use to sign into Canvas. So type that in. And just for consistency's sake, or just convenience sake, type in save settings here, and then press connect. Now another window will pop up asking for a secondary password. You can go to your Duo map on your mobile device, and where it says Indiana University, press the little down arrow and a number will pop up. That is your secondary password. Alternatively, you can type in the word push. It's all lowercase P-U-S-H, and then that will send a push notification instead to your phone. And you can just approve the notification there, and you won't have to open up the app every time. And that's what I do. It's more convenient that way. Once you've connected, and you'll know you're connected when you see a green arrow or green check mark next to IU SSL VPN here, then you can move on to the Autograder. To access the Autograder, go to grading.luddy.indiana.edu. And a page like this should pop up, and it should say C343 data structures here. Of course, I'm not actually in the class, it's some UI. I'll have to go to a different link. So for you guys, just go into grading.luddy.indiana.edu. For me, I'll go to this link here, and something like this will pop up. Alright, so you guys should see two repos here. It says Submission Repo and Distribution Repo. The Submission Repo is where you guys will be uploading your assignments onto, and the Autograder will access your Submission Repo to grade your assignments. The Distribution Repo is where we, the UIs, will be uploading our starter code onto, and you guys will be downloading or pulling from the Distribution Repo the files that we just uploaded, and you're going to work on it then, and then push it onto your Submission Repo. So if you imagine like a stream of water, the Distribution Repo is the source, and it flows down to you, and then you'll work on the files, and then it'll flow down to its final destination, the Submission Repo. That means that you should never be pushing onto the Distribution Repo. You should only push to the Submission Repo. Alright, so let's open up both repos right here. Okay, so right now I have the Distribution Repo. At the moment, it just says A2. And then we have your Submission Repo, which should say your username followed by submission. And at the moment, it's empty. The first thing you need to do is clone this Distribution Repo onto your main machine. In order to do so, you click the clone or download button. Now, you guys will not have to do this every time. In the future, once you clone it once onto your machine, you can just use git pull, and you can pull the new files and new starter code onto your machine. But for initial setup, you'll have to clone first. When you press this clone or download button, make sure it says clone with HTTPS and not SSH. If it says SSH, click use HTTPS right here. Press this little clipboard icon to copy this link onto your clipboard. and then open up Git Bash. We're going to assume you know how to use Git at the moment. If you don't know how to use Git, there is a Git and terminal tutorial on Canvas. It's in the PDF format, and there should be a video coming up soon on how to use Git and the Unix terminal. So open up Git Bash, and if you're on Mac or Linux, you don't have to use Git Bash. You can just use your standard terminal, and that'll be perfectly fine. All right, at this point, you want to decide what directory you want to put your C343 files in. This might be your documents folder, it might be your desktop, or it might be some special folder you created. Depending on where you want to put it, just make sure you have that chosen and then cd into that directory. So I'm going to put it on my desktop. So let's do that. Here we go. So if you see here, I am currently in my desktop. So at this point, in order to clone it into your desktop, type in Git Clone, and then that link that you copied earlier, paste that in. And then hit enter. So you notice here, we've cloned into that. So if we type in ls now, we can see it says distribution. So you've successfully cloned the distribution repo onto your main machine. Now you probably don't want to have it named a distribution because that'll be annoying to deal with. So if you want to rename it, type in mv for move and then distribution, and then name it whatever you want. So I'll name it C343 Spring 2020. All right, so if I type in ls this time, you can see instead of saying distribution, it now says C343 Spring 2020. cd into that directory. And at this point, we want to check what remotes do we currently have on this directory. A remote is basically a link to an online repository. So you have this current local repository installed on your machine. Now you want to see, okay, where is this linked to online? So at the moment, it's linked to distribution. So this link right here, and it's the origin remote. We want to rename that to something else because we'll be having two remotes. We have one remote that's connected to the distribution so you can pull the new starter code files onto your local machine, but we'll also have another remote that connects to your submission so that way when you work on your local machine, you can then push those changes onto your submission. Since we'll have two remotes, we want to rename the origin remote to something more descriptive. So we'll type in git remote rename origin distribution. I highly recommend you do this step. It's technically not necessary, but if you run into problems in the future, we're going to assume that everyone's followed this tutorial and followed it step by step. So do so for consistency. So type in git remote rename, renaming origin to distribution. Now if I do it this time, git remote v, we can see it says distribution instead of origin. All right. Now that we have that, we now want to link this with our submission repo. So go onto your submission repo, and if it's brand new, it should look something like this. And where it says quick setup, make sure it says HTTPS and not SSH, and then copy that into your clipboard. If this window doesn't come up and something like this comes up, then just do so through this button right here. To add it to this repository, do git remote add, and then we're going to give that remote a name. So I'm going to name it submission. We named other distribution, this one's to be named submission. And then hit a space and then add that link that we just copied. Press enter. And now if we do git remote -v, you can see it says distribution and submission. So because this is initial setup, we're now going to push. So if we look at this, we have an A2 file here. We're going to push that onto your submission. So do git push submission and wait for that to go through. And once that's gone through, if I refresh this page, now you can see we have an A2 here now. All right, if you followed every step of the tutorial up to this stage, you are now done with initial setup. So from this video point on, basically it's as if you're working on any regular assignment. So this could be A4, A8, anything like that. Before you start any assignment, there are two things you have to do. If you don't do this, you'll often run into problems. And most of the time that people run into Git problems, it's because they didn't do these first two steps. The first step is to do git pull distribution master. This will pull all of the new files from distribution and do this every time. And after that, this is also equally as important, do git pull submission master. This will update your repository so it's as updated as possible with distribution and submission. These first two steps are imperative. I recommend you do this highly. Okay, once you have done that, you can now begin working on your assignment as usual. Now I already have a version of A2 done, so I'm just going to go move that over here. So let me do that real quick. Let's see, assignments. All right, just gonna move that here. Okay, and so let me just remove this old A2 file here, and we're just gonna pretend that A2 solution is me working on A2. Okay, so now I have finished A2, so to speak. So what you want to do is you want to cd into A2 because you just finished A2, and make sure that when you do pwd here, you are at A2. You're not nested within A2, so you don't do something like this where you are at A2 and then source. You want to make sure you're at A2 specifically. So if I take pwd, it should say A2 here. Then do git add period. And what that does is it adds this directory onto the staging area. And since you've only worked on A2, that should be the only thing you need to add to the staging area. So do git add period. And now we want to do commit. So git commit.n, let's just say finished A2. All right. And then we need to push this to submission. So remember, do git push submission master, not git push distribution master or anything like that. It's git push submission master. Push that through. And now it has been pushed through. So if I refresh this, you can see here it says finished A2 because I just finished it. All right, so now that you've submitted it into your submission, you can now go to your grading tool here and click on A2, and this should pop up. And you should see here under builds, it should have the latest commit that you had. Mine was called finished A2, so that's what it should say over here as well. Then go to submissions and press submit assignment, and it will submit the most recent commit. So if you mess up a recent commit and you want to change it back, make sure you commit again because it's going to take whatever is the most recent commit. Press submit assignment, hit submit, and it's going to run the test through. And when it finishes, there we go, it should say results file. You can open that up. And it should say here, this little page comes up and it'll tell you what went wrong and what passed. So in this case here, we just had a very standard 2 + 2 = 4, and 2 + 2 does not equal 4 in our example. So we didn't get the points for that. And here, it should show you whether or not your test cases passed. And it should tell you what passed and what didn't pass. So if something here didn't pass, it would say, oh, your length method did not pass. It got a 0 out of 2, something like that. And you can use this to determine, hey, what's wrong with my assignment? And then when you figure out what's wrong with your assignment, then you can just fix it and then re-upload again onto your submission repo and then press submit again. All right, so that is it for this tutorial. If you guys have any questions, feel free to email us and ask away.